Hello, and welcome to Own Your Retirement. My name is Albert Lalonde from Kaizen Financial Group. If you'd like more information about what you hear during our show today, give us a call at 586-752-7008 or visit us online at www.kaizenfinancialgroup.com. That's Kaizen, Kaizen. And while on my website, click on the podcast page to check out past shows and to subscribe to our program on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or Amazon Music. All right. During the last several weeks, tariffs have become one of the hottest subjects within both the general and financial news cycle. And currently, the United States is in a, so to speak, war of policy in words with Canada, China, and Mexico about tariffs. Now, many people have some idea about what a tariff is, at least vaguely, but the important thing to consider is what tariffs could mean for the economy and more specifically, your bank account. Now, is it true that consumers end up bearing the brunt of tariffs because companies just pass the cost along? Do tariffs really change behavior? These are important questions. So, during the show today, we're going to discuss what tariffs are, what they could mean for the economy and you, and whether or not they really work as a policy hammer. But before we jump into that timely topic, let me introduce my co host whose wit and wisdom are coming to us today tariff free. Hey, Tony, how we doing, buddy?
Yeah, I know a lot of our listeners are terrified about
Mm-mm.
tariffs. You see what I did there?
Yes, I see
Terrified.
it. Terrified.
Yeah.
Love it.
Yeah, I don't know. That's kind of a bad dad joke, so I thought I'd do the sad trombone for it. But you know what? Yeah, and talk about hot off the presses. This is still a hot topic. It's still
Yes.
ongoing. Yeah, and we were talking a bit before the show, and like you say, Albert, you pointed out to me, Tony, tariffs have been going on a while. I mean, Trump
Yes.
enacted some tariffs and raised them against China during his first term.
Right.
And I think Biden may have even raised them during his term, but at least left them in. And
Yep.
um, so presidents have used tariffs all along in America or the administration and Congress to for a couple of different reasons. But it is interesting because I think where people get a little nervous is like, well, wait, Canada and Mexico. I was that way too. I mean, I get China, right? We
Right.
want more of that manufacturing to be done. This is one way to force companies to, instead of importing, if you make it more expensive, to manufacture here in the U.S. rather than importing. And so I know that's one objective.
Right.
And but I think Trump. You think Trump's using this mainly as a negotiating tool?
I do. Every president's got to have some type of leverage when they're working with other leaders of other
Oh,
countries.
sure.
And tariff is the perfect example, whether you want to call it tariffs, tax, or a fee or whatever. If you look in history, countries have been using concepts like that for a long time for leverage.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. And a lot of people understand tariffs, a lot might not, but not as much about what they mean for them or the average person out there. So that's
Right.
what we're talking about today, right?
Yeah, for sure. And we should get to a U.S. News and World Report article titled, What is a Tariff and Who Pays It? Spoiler alert, you will. It provides
Yeah.
actually some excellent quick education at the first. Let's just talk about what happened here. So, beginning of February of this year, President Trump announced a 25% tariffs on Canada and Mexico and a 10% tariff on China. Now, Trump said he instituted the tariffs due to the flow of illegal immigrants and narcotics. But then in less than 48 hours, it was announced that the American and Mexican governments had come to an agreement that delayed tariffs on that country for at least a month. And then less than a day after that, it was announced that tariffs on Canada had also been suspended for 30 days, pending further negotiation. So, in simple terms, a tariff is a levy or duty placed on something that's being imported into the United States. And you can think of it as, like I said earlier, like a tax on products.
Sure. Who pays the tariff?
Well, Whether it's an automobile, let's say, produced or anything else, the importer is responsible for paying the tariff at the port of entry. U.S. customs officials collect the tax, and the money ends up in the U.S. Treasury. Now, often the importer will simply pass the cost of the tariff along to all of us via, let's say, higher prices. Or, if not that strategy, the importer can simply choose to absorb some or all the cost, thus eating into profits. Now, the article explains that when tariff costs are passed along to consumers, it chips away at net income growth, which then drags down consumer spending, Tony.
Right. That's great to point out and interesting. Now, you already alluded to this earlier, but can you go into more detail about why tariffs are imposed in the first place?
Yeah, I mean, in many cases, tariffs are thought to have an economic advantage for the country that's implementing them, which in this case would be the United States. Now,
Sure.
sometimes tariffs are used to retaliate for what are considered unfair trade practices by the country exporting the products, or tariffs may be a protectionist tool used to support a specific domestic industry. Now, the recent tariff implemented by Trump don't seem geared toward knocking back an economic threat, but are instead a response to the flow of the immigration through Canada and Mexico. And in the case of China, Trump has explained the tariffs are in response to that country's production of the narcotic fentanyl. Now, throughout last summer and fall's presidential campaign, Trump made clear that tariffs against Canada, China, and Mexico were a distinct possibility if he were to win. So his announcement in February that tariffs were coming, well, should be seen as little surprise.
Right. Should be, but we still hear about it and people still get concerned about it. And so my first thought is, hey, our listeners out there shouldn't do anything rash. You don't ever want to make emotional decisions about your finances.
Mhm.
Don't base your financial strategy decisions based on news about tariffs or politics. You got to keep your politics and your finances separate for the most part.
Yes.
And again, it's a good reason to work with somebody like yourself, right?
Yeah, for sure. Um, when we talked about tariffs, and as expected, Canada immediately announced retaliatory tariffs of its own. And then
Yeah.
Mexico was slated to do the same, but backed off once it was announced that it negotiated a delay with the United States government after Mexico agreed to send more of its military to the border to slow the rate of illegal immigration. You see how that's working?
Yeah.
Again, it's the idea of just getting things stirred. The Canadian government, before the 30-day pause, implemented tariffs on, among other things, American beer, wine, and bourbon, as well as fruits and fruit juices, clothing, sports equipment, and household appliances.
Wow.
Again, it remains unclear, though, how China's government will respond to the tariffs.
Yeah. Yeah. So, what's the role of Congress with these
Mhm.
tariffs? I mean, could Congress essentially overrule the president's decision to implement these tariffs?
Well, while Congress could seek to pressure a president about tariffs, the fact is, current law gives any president wide discretion on trade policy.
Yeah.
This is especially true when it comes to, let's say, national security. For example, any president, not just Trump, could make the case that the tide of illegal immigration and illegal narcotics are a clear threat to the United States and its people. Now, as you probably expect, Congress has members who are vocally in favor of tariffs and members who are vocally opposed to them. And the current situation should be even less of a surprise when you recall that during his first term, Trump implemented significant tariffs on solar panels, washing machines, steel, and aluminum. Many of those tariffs were kept in place, well, like we said earlier, by the Biden
Yeah.
administration.
Yeah. All right. Well, I think this is important, and it makes it important to have a financial strategy to weather any economic downturn or upturn that might be caused by this. So, how can our listeners get a hold of you if they want to get a plan in place?
Yeah, folks, you can visit my website at www.kaizenfinancialgroup.com. That's Kaizen, Kaizen, or call my office at 586-752-7008 and discuss how we can answer your questions about the possible impact of tariffs, how it affects your retirement goals, or any other elements of your financial strategy. Remember, it's our goal to help you prepare for retirement so you can own your retirement.
Yeah, exactly. Now, you've been talking about the current tariff debate the government is having with our three biggest trade partners, and they are our biggest trade partners: Canada, China, and Mexico. We import more from those three countries than any other country, and the drop off is pretty significant after those three.
Mhm.
With at least Canada and Mexico, you mentioned the tariffs have been postponed. We'll see where that uh, what happens there. As it currently stands, I know financial experts really don't have a clear picture on how this situation will ultimately turn out. Nobody has a crystal ball, right?
Right. I mean, though we can't be certain how current tariff debate with Canada, China, and Mexico will play out, it does serve as a reminder that economic volatility could happen at just about any time and for just about any reason. In fact, a Kiplinger article titled "You Need a Retirement Contingency Plan: 5 Steps to Get It Done." Well, it has some excellent insights about how you may be able to prepare your assets for future economic uncertainty and volatility, regardless if it's through tariffs or anything else. Now, I think a conversation about contingency plans fits nicely into our conversation about tariffs and the chaos that they can create. Now, the first of the 5 steps is to, well, create an emergency fund, which is something we've often trumpeted on this show many times, Tony. And though you likely know how important an emergency fund can be, data suggests not enough people actually have one. In fact, the article cites a bank rate study that determined more than 1 out of 4 people have no emergency fund at all. And additionally, about 59% of Americans expressed discomfort with their amount of emergency savings. So, no matter where you fit into bank rates data, it's essential to have an emergency fund and to contribute to it regularly. Now, the money that you dedicate to your emergency fund should be held in an event you need it to address unexpected expenses like medical emergencies, home and car repairs, or maybe even a sudden job loss. Now, many financial services professionals recommend that you always have at least 6 months of living expenses in your emergency fund, Tony.
Wow. Well, and I know, before I started doing the show with you each week, I wasn't really paying attention to my savings or
Mm.
didn't really have an emergency fund, had some savings, but you really need a separate emergency fund and you do want to get that built up. I mean, you never know when the air conditioner or the furnace is going to go out, right?
Yes, definitely. And it's not always about just stuff you need. Think about that with the emergency fund. We most people have families, kids, and
Yeah.
sometimes you
Oh,
just need to
yeah.
help those kids too.
Yeah.
Okay, without setting you back. All right.
Right.
Now, the article's next recommendation is to make sure your investment portfolio is diversified. We've talked about this many times in the past. By balancing your asset allocation, you may position yourself to better manage potential risk. The article adds that portfolio balance is about more than simply investing in stocks and bonds. It's about investing in mutual funds, ETFs, real estate, all the stuff that's out there that can help your overall portfolio. Additionally, cash into a high yield savings account and opening an IRA may also be beneficial to folks. However, remember, it isn't enough just to diversify your investments. You should also rebalance those allocations over time because it may help you better manage risk and mitigate some financial losses. And then one caveat here, Tony, what I just shared with you comes directly from the article, and I won't go any further on the topic of investments because again, we simply don't have the time during our show to really get into all the possible risks and rewards that come with building a portfolio. But if investing is part of your financial strategy, I urge you in the strongest term possible to only do so when working with a financial services professional.
Yeah, I mean, speaking for myself, there's no way I would want to try to manage my investments without the help of a financial professional like yourself.
For sure. All right. So now let's talk about the next thing the article touts, the importance of preparing for future healthcare costs. Now, as many of you surely already know, the older you get, the more your healthcare is going to cost. And getting older is becoming more likely. In fact, the article references a study from the Center for Disease Control that determined the current life expectancy for American women is 80 and is 75 for American men. Now, while Medicare is an essential part of retirement for many Americans, it may also be a prudent move to discuss long term care insurance with your financial service professional. This type of insurance may help you address things like in home care, as well as nursing homes and assisted living facility services. Also, think about annuities with long term care benefits and life insurance with long term care riders. Both of those are more things to discuss with your financial service professional. And as you enter your, let's say, middle years and are heading closer to retirement, continue prioritizing your health. Eat well, exercise regularly, and get enough sleep. Taking better care of your health is a way to also take care of your bank account there, Tony.
Yeah, skip the burgers at lunchtime, maybe take a walk instead,
Yeah.
or in addition to a lighter lunch, take a walk. That's always great advice, something I'm trying to do more myself, and I think that's important. And I
Yeah.
want to remind our listeners, the camera adds 100 pounds. So
There you
just,
go.
for those that view the show and don't just listen, they watch it on YouTube.
Right, right. But and another thing to add about that of keeping yourself healthy is it also saves your pocketbook from again co-pays and
Yeah,
deductibles because all of a sudden
it
you're
does.
not healthy and have to go to the doctors or get a
Right.
procedures done. So think about that too. And then another way to buffer your retirement against potential future economic volatility is to create additional income streams or what I call mailbox money. Because traditional pensions are going the way of like the dinosaurs and Social Security's future. Well, we already know it's seemingly a permanent political football. So it may be important to work with your financial service professional to build that additional mailbox money. The article suggests discussing things like CDs, purchasing maybe rental property, or a side hustle as things worthy of a meeting with your financial service professional.
Yeah, and a side hustle doesn't mean going back to work
Right.
just for the paycheck. You can make extra money and something you don't like. You can make extra money taking on a part-time gig that you'll truly enjoy or will keep you
Exactly.
active or aligns with your interests. So that's what's nice about retirement is you can have a side gig that you actually enjoy and don't have to do just for the money.
Yeah. And if you're able to be in that wonderful position, just think about going to work and you're calling the shots.
Yeah.
That's that's always nice to do to go in and say, I'll work the hours that I need to work. So that's the
Yeah.
idea. Now, the article also concludes by noting the importance of remembering that future inflation is very likely. And
Yep.
again, it's part of tariffs too. As prices go up, because again, companies decide to raise their costs to make up for the tariffs. Well, that again gets pushed down to us, the consumer, which then means inflation moves up rapidly. And you have to be careful. And again, the federal government understands this, the Federal Reserve. That's why they're holding interest rates where they're at right now, seeing where things are. But they are feeling comfortable. But because of unexpectedly high inflation, you got to make sure that you're considering those future income needs. And like, if you have a pension, let's say, or annuities that's giving you income, check to see if they have cost of living adjustments or what we call COLAs.
Yeah. Yeah, that's important. Well, we've covered a lot today. We're out of time, but great show, Albert. Great topic and
Yeah.
a timely one. A lot of people are hearing a lot about this. So I get the message, don't panic, work with a financial professional. And, and that's the answer right there. And now, before we go, one more time, let our listeners know how they can get a hold of you.
Yeah, folks, you could give my office a call at 586-752-7008, or again, visit my website at www.kaizenfinancialgroup.com. That's Kaizen, Kaizen. And we can discuss how we can answer your questions about the possible impact of tariffs, your retirement goals, are you diverse, or any other elements of your financial strategy like emergency funds. Remember, it's our goal to help you prepare for retirement so you can own your retirement, folks.
All right. Thanks, Albert. And listeners and viewers, thanks for tuning in. That does it for today's episode of Own Your Retirement with our host, Albert Lalonde.